Okay if there's no cars in the curb lane, but if there's a car in the curb lane, we're going to move over to whatever left side.
Stops. The reason I'm talking to you is because in my background I was co-author of the Indianapolis Park and Boulevard System National Register nomination, and then also for Fort Wayne the multiple property cover document enabling them to put their Kessler system on the National Register. Because we need to respect everybody's time, questions and answers, we're going to have a collective one after the last talk at Taggart, and Ron Taylor and I and Peggy and Jim will all be there, and we'll be happy to stay until there are no more questions. We also have handouts there that will tell you a lot more about Kessler, plus resources and his life, than I'm allowed to do in 10 plus minutes here. So make sure you pick those up. And then, did anyone see Kurt Culbertson's talk on Wednesday? Cool. We recorded it. It'll be on our website. Let's get into why we're here today in this really strange little corner of Indianapolis. And what I need to start with, though, is the topography from the glaciers. The landform that we have here in Indianapolis is the drainage system from northeast Lawrence Township coming down to the White River. Several years ago, we did a Kessler-themed project with the Spirit in Place, and we needed some kind of a catchy name for the system that's here in Indianapolis. And then so Boston has its Emerald Necklace with its chain of parks and with streams. Minneapolis, and that one's designed by Olmsted. Minneapolis has their Grand Rounds, designed by H.W.S. Cleveland. This is all 1800s design. That has enabled Minneapolis to be one of the prime destinations as a quality of life. I want to go live there. A third important park system is Park and Boulevard system is the one in Kansas City. It doesn't have a catchy name, but it was designed by George Kessler, and it helped him build his national reputation as the expert in designing American cities. So back to the Spirit in Place. I'm from Michigan. I always use my hand, like I live here, I work here, blah, blah, blah. So I looked at this, and it's like, well, dang, that's Indianapolis. So an easy way to remember the Kessler system, we have Pleasant Run, Pogues Run, Fall Creek, White River, Eagle Creek, right here in your hand. My catchy name was the Green Velvet Glove. I figured that sounds kind of nice, just like, yep, that's here, holding the city together. So then, the context, historic context here. You may be familiar with Ralston's plan. After 1816, we became a state, and they needed someone to plat the city out. They hired Alexander Ralston. They hired him because he worked for the guy that designed Washington, D.C. Even back in 1816, we aspired to be world class, a civilized place. Indianapolis, the metropolis in the Indian country. Washington, D.C., our capital. Washington, D.C., the designer of Washington, D.C., was from Paris, design of Paris, the grids and diags. Grids and diags in Washington, D.C., grid and diag here in Indianapolis. After the Ralston Plan was put in place, that next 100 years until the late 1890s was known as the American Renaissance. We went from George Washington's plan for the canal water system to the railroad system to the automobile transportation system. We also totally polluted all of our waterways, totally, polluted all of our air with all of the factories. Unregulated growth. You could build anything with anything, materials next to anything from, the slaughterhouse to the housing project right next to it. Unregulated growth. We also at the time then the United States needed to look civilized, that we weren't this colony on this side of the water. So in 1893, in Chicago, World's Columbian Exposition, this was the time for the United States to step up and look world class, that we were competitive with those places on the other side of the ocean. So did anyone probably read that book, Devil in the White City? Okay, so that's the bad side of the White City. But anyways, Daniel Burnham and team built this incredible white city, but it gleamed. It showed cities as livable places rather than that thing at the end of the railroads. It inspired cities across the United States then. I want that. And cities needed to be competitive. Indianapolis, you name it, all cities competed then against each other. They needed to look good. Also then in this Renaissance, thousands of people were moving here. Thousands of people from the farmlands looking for jobs. Thousands of people from Europe immigrating here. Many of those people were German, and that's a good thing, that they landed here. At the same time, George Kessler was studying in Europe. His mom sent him there to actually keep him busy and to learn something. He took classes in forestry, botany, landscape design, and one class in civil engineering. And then he came back here, landed in St. Louis eventually, which is where his offices were. He was considered the national expert in designing cities. At the same time that he was designing cities from his own training, a guy named Charles Mulford Robinson was inspired also by the World's Columbian Exposition, and he wrote the books on how to design cities. His most famous book is the book entitled Modern Civic Art, still sort of available if you can find it, or in reprint. You can read it. It's incredible. Modern, they use scientific principles to design cities, the widths of the streets, a hierarchy of streets, the amount of feet for setback, open spaces to allow air circulation and sunlight into the dense residential neighborhoods. And even the length of time it needed for the maximum distance to get to a park. Parkland as part of the components of a city. Civic, because it was for everybody in the time. It wasn't like, oh, the rich people were going to design for them and forget about these people. And art. The most important thing is that there was an artful overlay on anything that was functional, from street design to bridge design. The whole place was artfully also designed. So fortunately, with our German population and German leaders, they hired George Kessler. He was hired in the fall of 1908, and he worked here and every place else until about 1916. And then he resigned from the park board here in 1916, probably as a result also with his work with World War I activities. So this is called he was labeled as a fine art and a technical science. It also was the German principles of sound mind and sound body for the importance of nature to soothe people's souls, sound mind, and then falling into the sound body. So then, why are we right here? Two reasons. One, it's where his plan began for the construction. Secondly, this is a prime example, really, of the genius of Kessler for multifunctional design. First, yes, that was a beautiful bridge, and now it's like, yeah. Okay, multifunctional. Does anyone remember the dam that was right down here? Taken out in 206. Right here, there's a nice little embankment there left is the only piece that if you mosey down there and want to kind of sit, it's there. That dam was sited by Kessler, the angle of it, first, so when George and Gladys go driving by in their Model T, it's like, I love this spot. Look at it, it's water, it's green, let's have a picnic. It's sited specifically there. Also, the Indianapolis Electric Company needed to be cooling their generators. There's still historic structures on the other side of the creek here that from that time period. Multifunctional, people needed a place to wash. There's water. So it ponded, they could wash here. Play in the water for recreation, fish for food and recreation. Also at that time, people knew that these green spaces, the parkways, were the lungs of the city. They cleaned the air, they took up the water, they prevented erosion, and even proof, there's now scientific data for noise deadening because of all of the turf areas. Multifunctional because he kept this land in the public domain. Most of our waterways, we are so fortunate that they're public. They're not private enterprise being constructed along them. Multifunctional, what you're going to see along the way is the broad curves that he didn't put his drives paralleling the streams. You're going to see a triangle on the left that is purposeful open space for the air and sunlight. You're going to see the setbacks of the houses to extend the park experience. You're going to see the tree lawns. They used to be called parkings. The grass between the sidewalk and the street. Parkings for more park experience, not for your truck. And his incredible 100-year oak trees, rhythm and unity in the design of the place. Birdsall Parkway, large parkway to signal visual scheme to connect Riverside Park to the system. That's all. The next stop is George Kessler. Okay, thank you so much.
Howdy, how are you?
Very well. I hope you're not talked out yet.
Not yet, not yet. Morning. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are you? Good morning for a bike ride. My name's Ron Taylor. I'm with Taylor Siefker Williams Design Group. I'm a landscape architect that's been working on the new update to the Indy Greenways master plan. I also have Scott Siefker with me today, and so hopefully between the two of us we may be able to answer any questions that you might have. How many people are from Indianapolis? Is everyone from Indy?
No.
No? Where are you from?
Columbus.
Columbus?
Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Okay.
We're just south.
Okay. Well, that's okay. We just wanted to kind of to get a feel for maybe how much to go into on a couple things, and if there's other stuff that everybody knows, I'd skip over. But we'll let me tell you a little bit. What I want to do is you know, you're out looking at some of the historic Kessler properties and works today. What I really want to focus on is how Kessler influenced the things that we're still doing today, and what's going on now 100 years later after the Kessler Park and Boulevard plan was done. A little bit of history, and we use the word greenways, but I think we're talking about the same thing generally. The vernacular is a little bit different. In Kessler's time, he talked about the parkways and the recreation spaces, the pedestrian walks and the pleasure drives. Today, we really talk about these things in terms of these green linear corridors that we're trying to put across the system. And we do tend to focus a little bit more on the pedestrian and bicycle paths part of that than we do on the parkways. The parkways have become a little bit more of just the infrastructure of the city. So, just to give you a little bit of background, Kessler's plan was done in the early 1900s. The Kessler Park plan was a 1908 plan, and it really looked at Indianapolis, which was much smaller at the time. After his death in 1928, another landscape architect named Lawrence Sheridan expanded that Kessler plan. The city really wanted to take a look at what was going to happen beyond just what was Indianapolis proper at the time, and Sheridan's plan looked all the way out to the extents of Marion County, which is now part of the city of Indianapolis. So throughout the 1900s, there were different efforts that started to implement those things, and it really wasn't until 1994 that the city revisited that Kessler plan in terms of doing a new greenways plan and looking specifically at the shared use paths and those types of recreation spaces that could be developed throughout the city. That plan was updated in 2002, and then our work is really the first expansion of that plan since then. But let me tell you a little bit about the system that's on the ground right now. If you go back to that 1994 plan, the city of Indianapolis has about 62 miles of constructed shared use path greenways that are built within the city. And of that original plan, there's still about 44 miles that are yet to be built. So we're still working on that original plan. If you took a map of the Kessler plan and you laid it over a map of the greenways of the city, what you're going to find is that there's lots of similarities. There's lots of, the lines are the same on some of those, because Kessler's work really was the foundation for the Greenway system that we've started to build here in the city. The work we're doing today really isn't that dissimilar to what he was doing and the types of issues that he was talking about in the community at the time. Some of the different things like connectivity. One of the biggest things about the Kessler plan was that he really was trying to provide these connections to these linear recreation spaces for every neighborhood in the city. And those are the same things that we're talking about today as we've been out talking to residents about the full circle plan, just on a much different scale. To give you just one other point that I missed and I didn't say was just to give you a sense of how popular the greenways are in Indianapolis. There's counters on most of the greenways. And in 2012, over 3 million people used the Indy Greenway system. So people have embraced that system, and that's part of the reason that they're looking for an expansion of what's happening out there. The full circle plan, what this plan is doing, some of the major points of this plan is it's really outlining a 252-mile Greenway trail system throughout the entire city of Indianapolis. We've included, first of all, part of it is still implementing what was going on and planned in 1994, which is part of the Kessler plan. So for instance, you're going to be seeing a trail segment just up the street here that's just newly constructed on the Fall Creek Greenway, but it's actually part of that 1994 plan, and of course Fall Creek Greenway was one of Kessler's major parkways here in the city. So it's interesting that we're still implementing some of those things that were talked about even at the time that Kessler did his plan there. So the full circle plan, we have 252 miles of trails, and it includes 5 different routes that come into the city center from different areas throughout the city, very similar to what's going on with the Monon Trail up on the north side. It looks at completing the original planned system, as well as going back and trying to improve some of the segments that are older and in need of repairs. One of the parts of this plan that's gotten a lot of attention is what's called the circle. And the circle really isn't about the circle, it's just convenient that it turned out that way. When we talk to the different residents, especially in the ring townships, the outer townships in Marion County, where there was no trail development, they were really excited about having the opportunity to get some connections to downtown. But what we heard a lot of was, we don't want to just go downtown. What we really want is we want to be able to go to things inside our township, or for instance, if you're on the south side, we want connections to other things that are on the south side that we use. So the result of that was the creation of these east-west connections across the north and south part of the city, as well as the north-south connections on these areas. Eventually, the organizing structure became, we got connections between Southwest Way Park, Southeast Way Park, Fort Harrison State Park, and then Eagle Creek Park. So the result is a 64-mile circle that will completely go around the city. The final thing is, if you look at some of the other plans, we're including several smaller greenway connectors. Part of that goes back to some of the early work that was done in the Sheridan plan, where they had identified additional greenways that should be considered. So when you look at the things we're talking about and doing now, you can still see Kessler's influence. The issues are the same. Kessler talked a lot about connectivity, and that was our #1 issue. Talked a lot about neighborhoods having access to recreation space and corridors, one of our top issues. Transportation was a component in both. Kessler also had a very strong sense of conservation and preservation of waterways, and so one of the things you'll see in this plan is there's a really strong ethic of environmental stewardship. So when you look at what's going on today, we're really just continuing some of the works and the principles that started with that Kessler plan. So we're excited about this, and we were excited to get started building the rest of the trail system. So I don't know if there's any questions.
Where appropriate, are you still following Kessler's design elements?
Pardon?
Where appropriate, are you still following Kessler's design elements?
Yeah, I'm probably not the expert in that. In some places I think the city's doing a really good job in trying to preserve some of the bridges, trying to come back and make those elements similar. In other places, because of the way that things are being funded, like for instance, the shared use path you're going to see up the street, probably isn't exactly as Kessler would have done it in terms of materials, but in terms of design intent, we hope that we're close.
Thank you.
What's the time frame on this?
We don't know. The planning horizon of this was 10 years, but we know that this is a pretty big vision that could take much longer than that. What we're seeing in the city of Indianapolis, though, is that it used to be the funding model was you apply for a grant, you get $1 million or whatever that cost is, and then you build a mile of trail, and then you do it again, and you keep building 1 mile at a time. What we're seeing now is an investment by the city where we're building entire segments at a time, or we're building 10, 12 miles at a time. So I think we're finding creative ways to fund this that will make it a reality sooner rather than later.
Isn't 3 segments of Eagle Creek being completed from 46th Street to Raymond all at the same time in
Yeah.
a year and a half?
Yeah, that's an example of the way it's being funded. Eagle Creek Greenway, which currently stops in this area, this entire segment all the way down to Raymond Street, is being designed and constructed at the same time. And I think there's four segments of it. So,
Thank you very much. We have to move on.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by.
And we'll see you back. We're the last group. We'll see
Okay,
you back there.
sounds good.
Where can one get a copy of the master plan?
We have a flyer at the final restaurant.
Sure. It's called Honda Ridgeline. Hurry. So you're welcome to sit, stand this way, looking at the park this way. So I want to talk more. Okay, can you hear me? You're good to go. Okay. I have even less time here, and so I need to make this quick and short. Talking about the National Register nomination, George Kessler's plan was for in Center Township. He died 1923. At that time, Lawrence Sheridan was already working for the city and plan commission. He expanded the Kessler plan all the way to the county limits. What that enabled us to do, thank goodness for city planners that kind of draw lines, is that when we drew the lines for the nomination for the Indianapolis Park and Boulevard System Historic District, we were able to keep continuous land, actually all the way out to Shadeland. Fall Creek is on the National Register, as is Pleasant Run. Unfortunately, what we couldn't do, Eagle Creek corridor is not on the National Register because it didn't have, it didn't hold itself together as Kessler planned, so we could not put that pinky on the National Register. Maybe someday, who knows? Nationally significant. In addition to his park system, he also designed individual parks, one of which is University Park, which is purposely why we're here. In addition, though, so national significance of our historic district. In addition, though, in 1989, thanks to Indiana Landmarks, this whole central green space from the library down through University Park, the nomination was written for it to be a National Historic Landmark. This is the cream of the crop, more than just nationally significant historic district. This is the most important places in the United States that define the United States. We only have 37 landmarks in Indiana. There's only 8 here in Marion County. Places like Angel Mounds, the Miller House, West Baden Hotel are some examples of those other landmarks that are within the state. The importance of this historic district as a National Historic Landmark, including University Park, is a cream of the crop definition of the city beautiful design for beautiful cities as a result of the World's Columbian Exposition. What Kessler did here in 1914 is he redesigned the park to have that. Before there were curvilinear walkways, and it was a beautiful place. It's been a park since 1876. You know, it's like this is not new for this to be the quiet green space that helps then you make your life livable when you've got the screaming kids and maybe a screaming husband, you know, bad work, all that jazz, that you come here or you look at it from all of these buildings. It's like this is the peace that you find because of nature and the green space. Formal design, you may or may not be familiar with. I'm not going into all of the sculptures that are here and the authors and all of that jazz. That's all available online. It's a formal green space. You have trees. This is passive recreation. It's for you and nature to be one. And I'm sorry, it sounds like hippie, but you know, it's you and nature here as a contrast to the rest of your life as recreating yourselves. That so George Kessler here, National Historic Landmark, and it needs to be kept that way with all of the new construction that we have in the city. Where will everyone go for their own quiet little green space downtown? So please consider University Park, and it's doubly important nationally.
What is their plan?
Plan?
Aren't they going to be doing something?
Well,
Should we all vote against it? Okay.
What's happening?
Okay, we got it right here. Time to vote, we say no.
Do you want to explain a little bit? What are we voting no for?
Dog and splash parks and playgrounds in the middle of a quiet green space. Thank you all. So you're on your way. Enjoy, and more questions at the end.
Well, on behalf of the Thomas Taggart Memorial Task Force, I want to welcome you to this site. My name is Jim Fadley, and I'm before you because I'm the author of the biography of Thomas Taggart. And I'd just like for you to take a look at this memorial and know that it is the largest memorial to an individual in the city of Indianapolis, which is a city of monuments and memorials, second only to Washington, D.C. Taggart is known as the father, casually and informally, but known as the father of Indianapolis parks, because while he was mayor, which was at the end of the 19th century, so there's going to be no quiz or no date memorization here. It was 1895 to 1901. He was a three-term mayor, and they were two-year terms in those years. While he was mayor, he established the first permanent board of park commissioners. He established the first permanent parks department. There had been fits and starts before this, but he got it going. And very significantly, the third achievement relative to what would then be the park and boulevard plan of George Kessler, he purchased 953 acres of land the size of Central Park in New York, well outside of the city of Indianapolis at that time, along the White River, and you're standing right smack dab in the middle of that green space purchase. He was an advocate for the City Beautiful movement, as was Kessler and a successor to all of that. The land, the 953 acres, included, starting south behind you, South Grove Golf Course, and then starting where you're standing now, Riverside Park, and then on north of 30th Street, Riverside Golf Course, which was opened in 1900, I think the second municipal golf course in the United States. And then across the White River, Coffin Golf Course. That was the sum total of the 953 acres that Thomas Taggart purchased while he was mayor. Just a few words about his life. He was born 5 years before the Civil War began in 1856 in Ireland. He is the quintessential immigrant success story. When he was 5 years old, he came across, and the family was absolutely without any resources, extraordinarily poor. He started working, left high school at 16, started working in railroad depot restaurants in the 1870s, came to Indianapolis, and eventually developed hotels. He owned the Denison, which is where the Regions Bank building is now, the Grand Hotel at Maryland and Illinois, and he owned the Union Station Depot Hotel, not the current Union Station, but its predecessor. He would go on after he was mayor and buy in 1901 the French Lick Springs Hotel in southern Indiana, which became his prime asset, and one of the key reasons also, aside from politics, that he was known. As he moved along as mayor, after that he served a stint as U.S. Senator, but probably most importantly, he was the Democratic boss of the state of Indiana in the first quarter of the 20th century. And because Indiana then was a swing state, you never knew which way it would go at the presidential level, Taggart played an outsized role on the national political stage. So there were Hoosier VP candidates, vice presidential candidates on the national tickets almost every year during that time period. And the one who won and was put on the national ticket by Taggart was Thomas Riley Marshall, who was Woodrow Wilson's vice president. Taggart played a key role in swinging the nomination in Baltimore in 1912 to Woodrow Wilson, and the list goes on of the political achievements. He and his family loved Cape Cod for the summers, and so this is just a little fun fact. They started going to Cape Cod around 1900. 1916, they built a remarkably beautiful summer home and added 2 other homes, an actual compound. The village they favored was a little village named Hyannisport, long before another Democratic political family named Kennedy arrived in town. The Taggarts still are there. They consider the Kennedys, successor Kennedys, still newly arrived in Hyannisport. Joe and Rose Kennedy bought the house next door to Thomas and Eva Taggart. And in the village, actually, if you go to Hyannisport, the most commanding, impressive home is the Taggart home, far more so than the home that Joe and Rose Kennedy bought next door. When I was doing research, it was always kind of funny when you'd pull out of the driveway, there'd be cars going by slowly thinking you were a Kennedy coming out of the Taggart house. There's a copy of their summer home on a hilltop, Mount Airy, behind the French Lick Springs Hotel. That's an exact copy in brick. So if you're ever down at French Lick, ask to see the Mount Airy house, about 2 miles way up, second highest spot in the state, behind the hotel, and you'll see the brick replica of the clapboard summer home in Hyannisport. If I didn't say this, in 2010, Indiana Landmarks named this monument to its 10 most endangered list and kept it on the list in 2011. Under the sponsorship of Indiana Landmarks, we formed a 17-member task force to restore this memorial. We're getting ready to do the feasibility study now to be a $1.5 million restoration. Engineers, architects, neighborhood representatives, and people who care about preservation in the city and its history joined this task force and gave their time. It's been a wonderful experience. And we are in partnership with the Indianapolis Parks Foundation, which will be the fiscal agent, the 501c3 for the project. And we have a handout that details some of that. And we're also connecting to reconnecting to our waterways, the ROW project, if you know about that initiative in the city to bring more attention and to embrace the waterways of the city, as George Kessler did with his plans. So we hope to, as it was in 1931 when this classical colonnade was built, we hope to open that view to the White River up. There are 5 beautiful bends in the White River from 16th Street to 30th Street, and of course Kessler's beautiful bridge, 30th Street Bridge, just upriver from this memorial. Peggy Gamlin is a member of the Taggart Memorial Task Force, and she has been a representative from the Riverside Civic League and a wonderful advocate for our project. We've appreciated her time and energy and passion and enthusiasm for this area, this park, and this memorial. So I'll ask her to say a few words about it.
You got a cool bike. Whose bike is this? You can't miss this one. That is really cool. This is my neighborhood. I grew up here as a child, and then, of course, you went to college and you move away, and then things happen, divorce, things like that, and then I moved back as an adult. And I live on Riverside Drive, so it's my neighborhood again. Now, as a child, I used to play in this park, and I would ride my bike up to the park, past the Taggart Monument, up to along this side of the park, and there's a couple of hills. It's like it swoops in, and there's a particular hill that is beside this huge tree, and we used to call it Suicide Hill. And the goal was to make it down, my classmates and I, make it down the hill. Who could make it down the hill the most times without wrecking? And of course, the biggest scars on my knees are from that hill. Another thing we used to do as kids is just play on the Taggart Monument because the fence was not there. It was not falling apart. It was not, Indy cars didn't have to worry about the limestone hurting anybody. But as a child, we used to play on it. And so I knew about this monument, but I really didn't know what it meant. And then I started researching Thomas Taggart and learning who he was. And one of the things that in learning that, and then we started holding cleanups to keep the fence line clean like it is now. Then we eventually got connected with Indiana Landmarks, and Jim, who's the author of the book of Thomas Taggart. And the more I learn about this man, what really impresses me is he was a visionary. He was a visionary that, how much education did he have?
He left high school at 16.
Yes, he was a visionary, and the achievements, imagine the achievements that this man has accomplished. And I started realizing how important he is, not only to me, a resident of this area, but the city of Indianapolis, and to anybody that wants a mayor like that. A mayor that buys this land, 3 golf courses, all this park that's a little bit, a smidgen larger than Central Park, and develops, and then brings in Kessler to develop a park system for the city of Indianapolis. That's pretty impressive. Now, on the side of the monument, it says, and this is what touched me once I started getting involved in saving this monument, to Thomas Taggart, lover of mankind, whose foresight made possible this park. I mean, what kind of testament? I mean, wouldn't you like that to be on your tombstone? Imagine, that type of testament. And him coming from Ireland, his story is just incredible. So I embrace Thomas Taggart like he's an elder grandfather or something like that, but he is a grandfather. He is really the father to Indy Park. And by that, because my neighborhood, because all this is in my neighborhood, he's a father to the parks. And he's a father to what is the heart of Riverside Park. So I just want to share with you, Jim has a flyer over there that tells you the details about Taggart. And then we also have a flyer that will talk about the Riverside neighborhood, all the other things that are going on, 16 Tech Park and Soapbox, the things that are going on, and the way for you to get in contact with us. But if you come up with, we are trying to figure out how to sustain this monument and how to make it a venue for different things. If you come up with any ideas, some of the things that have been thrown out because he was a mayor with vision is that we put some type of tribute on these mediums to all the mayors of Indianapolis. So it becomes an educational process of not only just Taggart, but all the mayors. And then maybe we might inspire them to do some of the things that be visionaries. So if you come up with any ideas, please contact Jim, please contact Susie, or Indiana Landmarks, or me. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
And on behalf of Indiana Landmarks, thank you very much for your participation and interest in this program. And if you want to take advantage of the great weather, ride on down White River Parkway to the 30th Street Bridge. It's pretty close. It's another beautiful Kessler design structure. And all of our speakers will be over here to answer questions, and we've got handouts and refreshments for you. So thank you very much for coming.
and people would actually have more opportunities.